Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mark, a trainer here at WEX Field Service Management, and today we are covering QuickBooks Sync Training. This webinar will cover what QuickBooks Sync is, one-way sync versus two-way sync, QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop, how to use the QuickBooks Sync tool for my QuickBooks Desktop users. We'll go over customer sync, invoice sync, payment sync, back office settings, where to find your training on how you can learn more about sync on your own time, and I'll just provide some syncing tips, tricks, and best practices. We'll do a live Q&A at the end where you'll be able to get your questions answered live on stream. And the very first topic we're talking about is, what is QuickBooks Sync? WEX FSM integrates with QuickBooks and will sync data like your customer information, your invoice history, and payments. This will eliminate the need for double entry. So as long as you have the sync connected, you will enter your customers' invoices, payments. You're going to be running jobs in WEX FSM, and that will just sync down to your QuickBooks. So you have that one-to-one comparison of data in both places. Now, there are two versions of QuickBooks. There's QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. I will say, as a caveat, QuickBooks Desktop is being phased out by QuickBooks, but we do still support our QuickBooks Desktop customers. So I will be going over how that works today. And then there are two types of syncing items in your system. Some items are a one-way sync and others are a two-way sync. And we'll get into the details about that in just a second. So what's the difference? One-way sync versus two-way sync. Some items you will enter into WEX FSM first, and it is a one-way sync from WEX FSM to QuickBooks. These items are your customers, invoices, and payments. Those are the main one-way sync items. So for example, if you are out of onboarding, you're officially syncing, everything is, hooked up. If you add a customer in QuickBooks, let's say, it will not sync up to WEX FSM. Customers, invoices, and payments must be entered into WEX FSM first, and then that will sync down to your QuickBooks. However, there are some items that are two-way sync items. You can enter these into both WEX FSM or QuickBooks, and it will sync both ways. This would be things like your chart of accounts, taxes, and QuickBooks item list. Also, welcome, Richard. We are recording today's session, so you will be able to watch a replay of this. I'll show you where to find that at the end to catch anything you may have missed, but welcome. Two-way sync items, those are going, so let's say, same scenario. You are officially out of onboarding, your sync is turned on. If I make an adjustment to my tax groups or my income accounts or my QuickBooks item list, those will update and sync up to WEX FSM. So important to know, and we will be diving into the system, and I will show you examples of one-way sync versus two-way sync items in just a little bit. Also, I think Joe, welcome, Joe. We have already gotten started here. However, we are recording today's session, so you will be able to watch a replay of this, and I'll show you where to find that at the end so you can catch anything you may have missed. Welcome, Joe. So let's talk about QuickBooks Desktop. If you are a QuickBooks Desktop user, it does require a sync tool for the sync to actually work. With WEX FSM, you will have the sync tool on your computer. It will, like that app, the little sync tool app, will just run in the background, but that is the connection. That is the communicator of WEX FSM to QuickBooks Desktop. The sync tool must be installed before you make the switch. So any of you who may still be in onboarding and you're kind of just making sure that your sync is going to be ready to go once you have made the switch, if you're QuickBooks Desktop, you must get your sync tool installed. To install the sync tool, you will go to the Help Center, which is the little smiley face guy in the bottom right of your system. You'll go to the Tasks section and go to QuickBooks Sync Training. I will show you where to find this later. You can also just contact customer care and let them know, hey, I need a sync tool install, and they'll get you hooked up. A representative from WEX FSM will install the tool for you and teach you how to use it. Now, there is some preparation for the sync tool install. Again, this is for QuickBooks Desktop users only. And you want to make sure, number one, get your sync tool install meeting scheduled. This is the visual of that. You'll go to the Help Center, go to Tasks, and go to QuickBooks Sync Training. In there, you will see, please click this link to schedule your install meeting, and you just pick a date, time, and make sure you show up. Now, to prepare for this, you will need to bring your admin username and password for WEX FSM and QuickBooks Desktop. You'll also want to attend the meeting on the computer with your main QuickBooks Desktop file. That way, our representative can install the app and link it to your QuickBooks. If you are using a server, there are some cases where you don't actually have the file on your desktop. It is on a server. Just let your representative know, and that way they can know where the best place to install the app will be. Now, the sync tool, after you get it installed, it will look like this. You will log into WEX FSM. You'll log into QuickBooks in the tool itself, and then you are able to click Settings and change or update your auto sync status. So the sync tool for QuickBooks Desktop does allow you to choose an auto sync. If you have it set every 15 minutes, at the 15-minute mark, every 15 minutes round the clock, it will sync any new information or updates that you've made in WEX FSM and sync that down to your QuickBooks. So that is QuickBooks Desktop. If you are a QuickBooks Online user, the QuickBooks Online does not have a sync tool. So everything is cloud-based. It's actually very easy. You would have provided your QuickBooks Online credentials when you signed up and did your initial data load, and our data team is able to use that to grab the info that they need. There's no manual sync for QuickBooks Online. The sync happens every 10 minutes on the 10s round clock, which is different from QuickBooks Desktop. With QuickBooks Desktop and the sync tool, there is a manual sync option, so you can have auto sync turned off and only run a sync when you want by clicking the manual sync button. That's for QuickBooks Desktop. QuickBooks Online, there's no manual sync option. It's just going to sync automatically every 10 minutes, which is nice. You don't have to think about it. It's just going to sync automatically for you. And if I make an adjustment to a customer, let's say, that adjustment will just sync down on the 10-minute mark, and you'll see that new update in your QuickBooks as a one-to-one comparison. So, two versions of QuickBooks, QuickBooks Online, QuickBooks Desktop. Biggest differences, QuickBooks Desktop does require the sync tool and will allow manual syncing. And QuickBooks Online, there is no sync tool. It's through the cloud, but there's no manual sync option. It will just sync automatically every 10 minutes. Now, for the sync is very simple in terms of you're going to use your system. You're going to enter customers, invoices, payments. But it's good to know where you can check sync statuses in your system. We do have a way for you to look and make sure, is everything syncing as intended? And if there are any errors, any sync errors that happen, you want to make sure you're comfortable knowing where you can even know or check that there's an error, and then how can you troubleshoot that error on your own or get assistance with that. So for one-way sync items, we're going to be looking for our customers, invoices, and payments in WEX FSM. And for our two-way sync items, we want to look at our classes, income accounts, tax groups, payment terms, and QuickBooks item lists. So now let's go ahead and dive into WEX FSM and see where we can find these syncing items. All right, let me calibrate my notes here. Okay, very good. So we are now in WEX FSM. If you log in to your system and go to the customers page, which is in the main navigation right here, click customers. That will bring you to your main customer list. As we mentioned, customers are a one-way sync item. So you will enter your customers always first into WEX FSM. To do this, you will click the red plus button here and just enter in a new customer. You can enter them as a residential customer or a commercial customer and click save after you fill out the information. Once you do this, depending on which version of QuickBooks you have, that will then sync down to your QuickBooks. It's a new customer, so it will create a new customer profile in your QuickBooks, and you will see a one-to-one comparison. You'll be able to see the customer name, their address, their email, and you'll have now a customer profile in your QuickBooks. Now, a couple things about this page is you can see the auto sync status. So if the sync status here has an error, you'll know that the sync is not happening for that customer. You can hover over this and it will tell you what it is, like what the error is, and give you like the option of what needs to happen to make it so that it is syncing. And then, of course, if you have questions about that or need help with that, you can always reach out to customer care, little smiley face guy at the bottom here, and contact support. Now, really with customers, we're not seeing a lot of issues with that. You're going to enter your customer. It's going to sync down. In theory, everything should be syncing, perfectly all the time. But if there is, for whatever reason, some type of sync, maybe you have a duplicate customer and it is wanting to just prevent creating duplicates, it may let you know about that from here, and you can just troubleshoot from there. Another thing you can do on this page is to merge customers. And there is a specific process for merging customers as it relates to the sync. If I have two accounts, maybe it's I accidentally added two of the same customer. Maybe I have two customers who have recently gotten married and now moved in together. Whatever it is, you will select both customers and click merge. And now you just want to follow the process here. You would first determine who's going to be the master customer and which is going to be the merging customer into the master. So let's say that we want Bree to be the master. That means that everything in the merge with master account will just merge into the master account. But as it relates to sync, this part is very important. And we give you a little warning here. It says not performing this merge in QuickBooks will result in sync errors if the master customer selected in QuickBooks is not the same as the master customer selected in WEX FSM. So what does that mean? If you're going to merge a customer, I would merge those two customers in QuickBooks first. Make sure the same master is selected, and now the merge has been done in QuickBooks, and there's only one master customer in QuickBooks. Then come into WEX FSM and do the same merge. Select the same master. And then when you merge and it goes to connect with the same customer in QuickBooks, it'll be a one-to-one comparison. It'll see the master is the same. And now you have officially merged those accounts together. So that is tips on how to do your merge correctly as it relates to sync. All right. Next, so this is customers. This is a place where you can see all your customers and check the sync statuses. The next one-way sync item is going to be invoices. So we're going to go to Jobs, Invoice List. Now you're going to be working jobs. You're going to be creating invoices for those jobs. Every time you create an invoice in your system, that will then sync down to your QuickBooks. And remember, invoices need to be entered into WEX FSM first, as it is a one-way sync item. When you create an invoice, it will then show up in the invoice list. And so from here, Jobs, Invoice List. This is a big list of all of your invoices in your system. And I would say the best use case for this page is to check your auto sync statuses. So let's see an example of this. If I click auto sync status, filter here, ready means that this item is ready to sync, but it has not synced yet. So like if your QuickBooks Online, maybe it hasn't hit that 10-minute mark yet. Not ready means that there's something preventing this item from syncing. Off, you can just turn the sync off for certain items. Maybe you create an invoice that you don't want to sync for some reason. You can turn that off. If there's a sync error, it will let you know, meaning it is not able to sync and some troubleshooting needs to happen. Syncing means it's actively syncing. So sometimes if you come in here, let's say right on the 10-minute mark, you'll see it's actively syncing. And when that is done, it will say synced. And that means that you should be able to see it in both places now, WEX FSM and QuickBooks. Now, let's look at some not ready examples because you can do your troubleshooting for sync right from here. And let's take a look at some of these. So this is very common. Let's say that you create an invoice in your system, but you get a phone call right at that moment. So you save the invoice, but you haven't actually added any items to it yet. In order for an invoice to sync, it must have an item added to it. So right here, we can see this has a $0 amount. So I'm going to assume this is one of those scenarios. If I want to see what's going on with the not ready status, I'll click on details and it tells you what it wants. So this says this invoice does not have any line items or line item descriptions and cannot be synced to QuickBooks. Please add a line item, and so on. This will fix itself. So if you created this invoice, it will not sync unless you have added items to it. Once you add items, let's say I go back into that saved invoice, I add a couple items from my price book, and then I click save, that'll just fix itself. It'll sync down. You'll see a copy of that in your QuickBooks. I would not be too worried about these not ready statuses. Let's look at this one though. This one does have a value, so we know there's some items on here. And let's see what it says. Click details. A tax group is required to sync to your QuickBooks. So you just select the tax group. I would look at what this item is. Let's say we'll do Charlotte and save. That has now been fixed. It has the information that it needs. And on the next sync, it's ready to go. It'll sync over. Some of these, let's see if we can find an income account one. Tax group, tax group. All right, so these are all tax groups. Uh, Sometimes, this is a pro tip. If your technicians are creating custom line items in the field, income accounts are not required when you create a custom line item. However, they are required for syncing. So if you have technicians that are just making custom items in the field, which can be a great thing, but they're not selecting income accounts, you will notice that every single one of those invoices are not going to sync because the income account is what tells WEX FSM where to sync the items down to your QuickBooks. And we can actually look at a quick example of this. So right now I'm on an invoice. Let's say I'm a technician. I create a custom line item and I do not select an income account when I create this and I add it and save the invoice. Your system will not know where to send this, where to sync this. And so you will get a not ready status on the invoice page. So to avoid this, you just have to make sure anyone who is going to create a custom line item knows they need to select an income account. There are permissions where you can set to where your technicians cannot make custom line items. So that is up to you, but just know this is something that has a potential to happen. And you just want to make sure everyone knows, add the income account to your custom line items. That way you don't run into any sync not ready statuses. All right. Obviously, in theory, all of this will be syncing correctly. You're going to create your invoices. Those will be saved in your system. You have your income account selected. It's going to sync great. But every once in a while, if you do run into a not ready or an error, you can easily do your troubleshooting on your own here by clicking details and doing what it tells you. And if you do run into anything that you have questions about, you can just reach out to customer care and they are there to help. Next is the payment list, and that is going to be our third one-way sync item. You'll get here by going to Jobs, Payment List, and same as the invoice list. This is a big list of all of your payments. If someone, let's say you take a payment in WEX FSM, at the end of the day, you're in your QuickBooks, you're looking for that payment and you notice it's not there, I would go to the payment list and search for maybe that customer. You know which customer it is. So you could type in their name in the search here and see what the sync status is. And if there is some type of error, then you'd be able to know what that is and what needs to be updated from here. But payment list, you can search by payment type, payment method, payment status, customer name, payer name, or amount. So great place for you to check your payments that you're entering into your system. Okay, so those are our one-way sync items. Now let's take a look at examples of two-way sync items, meaning it will sync whether you're updating it in WEX FSM or in QuickBooks. To do this, let's go to Settings, Accounting, and Taxes. Everything on the accounting and taxes page are two-way sync items. It will tell you on this page which version of QuickBooks your account has. And then if you have any classes, some of my customers use classes in QuickBooks, others don't. Classes is a QuickBooks feature. So if you do use classes, you will want to have that turned on. And it's important to know this. This is actually a newer feature that we have added. And this says assign invoice level class to line items. If I hover over the I, it lets me know if turned on, the class you assign to your invoice will populate for all items. This is simply a time saver. And you have two options for how classes will interact when creating proposals and invoices. So the first option is only populate class to line items that do not already have a class assigned. And that would be being pulled in from your price book. And so this says only populate a class for line items that don't already have a class. When you're creating your price book items, let's say from more applications, price book, my price book. If you're building out price book items, each item, and we're just going to click on the general part here, has a section for income account. And if you go to additional details, here is the class field. If the item you're adding from the price book has a pre-selected class, that first option will not update it. It will leave it alone and it will let the default class be the class that's selected when it's added to your job forms. The second option is populate all line items with the class selected at the invoice level. So as an example, if we go to our invoice and I add an item, let's say, let's just add a general part here, add item. If I update the class here, it will override the default to all items that I've added, which for some, that's what they want. You know, I want the class for everything for this job to be the same. So instead of having to go in and update the class for, let's say 15 items that were in there, if you have that second option enabled, you can save some time by just selecting a class here, and it will then override and apply to all items in the product section. So let's go back. So just to reiterate, if you are a classes user, option one will leave the defaults alone and only update if there's no default class. And populate all will update to where it will just override it regardless of whether it has a default class. Income accounts are two-way sync items. Inventory part accounts, two-way sync items. And taxes are two-way sync items. Now, a couple details about your taxes. If your QuickBooks has tax groups and you sign up for WEX FSM, you turn on the sync, it will be a one-to-one comparison of tax groups in your QuickBooks and tax groups in WEX FSM. And since it's a two-way sync item, you can just do all of your editing and updating in either system you want. So if you want to update a tax group, do that in QuickBooks. That will sync up to WEX FSM and vice versa. Auto lookup tax rate. Now, this is important to know about. So if you charge taxes, you need to have tax collection turned on, period. But this option, auto lookup tax rate with zip tax, is great for people with newer QuickBooks. Maybe you literally just started a new QuickBooks account and you don't have a lot of tax groups. This will help fill out your tax group list and just populate common taxes based on your area. And that can give you a really nice list to work from. It's essentially going to be adding tax groups into your system. Some customers love this because it's a time saver. it knows which taxes are great for your area and will just give you a bunch of tax groups that work. And you'll see those then be in your WEX FSM account, and those new tax groups from ZipTax will sync down to your QuickBooks. Other customers do not like this at all. They've been using their taxes the same way in QuickBooks for many years and, don't touch my taxes. So in that case, you want this off. That means it's not going to add any additional tax groups, and just what is in your QuickBooks is what will be in WEX FSM as a one-to-one with no additional add-ons. Important to know about that. And with these tax groups, if you want to see like a little more information about them, you can click the little drop down here to see itemized taxes that make up the full group of tax rates. Okay. And so that is two-way sync items are found here on this page. We also have, there's two other two-way sync items we'll take a look at. The next is payment terms. Let's get out of here. Okay. To get to this page, payment terms, we're going to go to settings in the top right, jobs, payment terms. Payment terms are a two-way sync item. If you have set up payment terms in your QuickBooks and you started syncing with WEX FSM, this will be a one-to-one comparison of what was in your QuickBooks originally, and you'll see those here. If you update new payment terms in QuickBooks, that will sync up to WEX FSM, and vice versa. You can add new terms here, and those will show up in your QuickBooks. And what are payment terms? These are the terms of payment between you and your customer. So maybe for my single family home, residential kind of one and done jobs, I want due on receipt. I do the job, now it's time to pay. If you're working with a commercial customer, maybe you're setting them up with a net 30 or net 60. And in order for that to happen, you need to have that specific payment term in your system to be selectable. So come in here, add your terms that you have. Maybe most of your customers are one term, but you have a couple special customers you need different terms for. Put them all in here. Those will then be updatable on your proposals and invoices when you're creating those job forms. Last but not least, for two-way sync items, we have your QuickBooks item list. So WEX FSM has an incredible feature for creating price book items. These are items that you would add from your price book onto your job forms, like your invoices and proposals. And you would build out, these are the items you're actually charging your customers, parts, labor, etc. However, maybe for years you have used your QuickBooks item list as your main pricing, and that QuickBooks item list does sync to WEX FSM. If I click Add Item, that's going to open up my price book options. And if you are syncing to QuickBooks, you will see a From Your QuickBooks Item List tab. You'll click on that. And now all QuickBooks item list items will be here. Now there's no like home base, like the WEX FSM price book has a specific price book page where you can just look at and create items. WEX FSM does not have that for the QuickBooks item list. So if you're going to make updates, price changes, title changes, description changes to your QuickBooks item list items, you will need to update that in QuickBooks, and then that will update and sync up to WEX FSM, as this is a two-way sync item. Okay, And so that is the bulk of the information that we have for today. Just a couple tips and best practices for you. If you do have any questions, if there's a sync issue or something that you run into and you need help, reach out to customer care. You can go to the help center in the bottom right and contact support. That is one of the main ways to get help. Um, oh, so Richard says my tax account's duplicated in QuickBooks Desktop from WEX. How do I clean that up? Let's take a look at that in just a second. I'm going to finish up wrapping up what I'm saying here, and then we'll dive into the Q&A, and that will be the first one I answer. So sit tight, Richard. Just 1 second on that. Okay, so reach out to customer support if you do have any specific questions. If you want to just learn more about QuickBooks in general, we do have a lot of knowledge-based articles, video tutorials that you can watch and learn from. To get to those, you'll go to the Help Center, go to Help, and then type in QuickBooks. And you can narrow your search based on what about QuickBooks you want, but anything you type in here will pull the key terms and you'll see all of our QuickBooks knowledge base articles from here. And if you're still in onboarding, if you're still like getting your sync set up and you have not made the switch yet, definitely go to tasks and do your QuickBooks Sync training. This will be tailored based on your QuickBooks if you're online or desktop, and it will have a step-by-step guide of exactly what to do to set up and understand Sync in your system. All right. So that's all the information we have for today. We're going to go to our Q&A now, but I just want to say thank you so much for joining. My name is Mark with WEX Field Service Management, and this has been QuickBooks Sync Training.